Hello friends, good to see you again through this video. Today I wanted to share a very important topic with you. This is what the title of the topic is. People who don't have ego will encounter unimaginable miracle in their life. People who don't have ego will encounter unimaginable miracle in their life. When we talk about this word ego, today we see ego is not restricted to only one sect of people or only one group of people. Like usually we think maybe the rich people have more ego because they don't want to bend themselves before others. But it is not that case. Even poor people also have ego because sometimes they refuse to accept help from others, thinking that what will others think about us. If they let their ego and really ask for help, right, things could have been different for them. There would be a lot of people who can help them, but sometimes the ego stops people in asking for help, right? And that is when they continue to live in miserable ways. So today the point I wanted to stress is people who let go their ego, right, who let off that ego, who want to remove that ego from their life, they will see a lot of unimaginable miracles in their life. That's what I wanted to share. And one passage that I have taken as an example for this topic is from 2 Kings chapter 5. So if you get a chance today, please read that whole chapter, 2 Kings chapter 5. Here we talk about a person called Naaman. He is a commander of the army of the king of Syria, right? So he is a Syrian army commander. And it is at that time Syrians have captured some people from the land of Israel also. And there was one slave girl who has been captured from Israelite, and she was working as a maid for this Naaman's wife. Okay, so Naaman's wife had this maid who was actually a captive from Israel. So this Naaman, he had leprosy, and in those days leprosy is such a dangerous disease, right? So he had leprosy, and he somehow he was like finding it very hard to live with that. So this maid who has been a captive from Israel, right? So she is like telling her mistress that if the Lord will go, if Naaman goes to my land, there is a prophet of God. If he can pray over him, definitely Naaman will be healed. So she is giving a suggestion, or she is giving a way for his miracle, right? Like for his deliverance. So now the choice is with Naaman to whether take it or leave it. So this is where we need to first understand, this is the first test of ego for Naaman here, because he is now listening to not a great person, not a great doctor or somebody, right? Like after all, a slave who has been a captive from Israel, and also just like a maid, she was just doing like household work or helping wife of Naaman, right? So she is giving the suggestion. And that suggestion is also something to go to another land where the Syrians have made a stronghold over the people of Israelites, right? So it is now Naaman have to go back, and then he has to humble himself before the prophet, right? So all these things have to happen. So the first test of ego for Naaman is whether to listen to this girl or not, right? But he chose to listen. He ignored his ego. He did not think, I am the commander of the Syrian army. Who is this girl? Who is this maid that, she is advising me to do this? She, instead of refusing her advice, he took it in a positive way, and he asked the permission from the king, and now he is going to Prophet Elisha's home. So Naaman is going there. So if you read in verses 9 and 10, right? So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Now here comes the second test for Naaman, second test of ego for Naaman. So Naaman came with his horses and he was waiting at Elisha's door. So Elisha did not come out. He did not even bother to come and shake hands with Naaman. Instead, what he did, he sent his servant and said, ask Naaman to go and take 7 dips, like a bath in the river Jordan, and he will be healed. That's all he said. He didn't even come out to greet him or welcome him or just lay his hands over him and pray or nothing. So this was again another test of ego for Naaman here, because being a captain of the army, and being a very recognized person, he expected some kind of a respect, right? So today, how many times we would also be in that kind of a situation? Imagine, like the first test of ego, right? When sometimes when we receive counsel or when we receive advices from people who are way below the social economic status of us, we don't even care about that. We don't even think about it. We just ignore, because we think, who are they to advise me? Their status is so low, I'm so rich, I have this status, I'm so educated, I don't want to listen to them. Sometimes that is where God keeps the door for our miracle. The door for our miracle or the breakthrough that we are expecting always opens in that kind of a small door. So if we neglect those kind of doors, we will only become stumbling block for our own blessings or for our own miracles. So the same way, as I said, when people don't respect us, though we deserve the respect, though we feel that we have so much accomplished, but still, why people are not respecting me, why they haven't given me the importance. So how are we going to handle that situation? Naaman also kind of almost, he failed that ego test, but thankfully his servants, right, they persuaded him, and they said, don't get angry about this, we'll just go to the river Jordan and we'll dip, you take 7 dips and let's see, you will be healed, right? So many times when we feel we are not respected or we are not given our due share, let's put aside our ego and just keep moving forward on whatever the Lord says. See, the reason why we see these kind of people who ignore egos, the people who ignore their ego, right, why they receive abundant blessing is they would be able to humble themselves before the Lord and also humble themselves before man. So that is one of the reason they can easily find favor with God, they can easily find favor with men also, right? So we need to understand this basic principle. When we shred that ego away from our life, obviously we open the doorway for our blessing. We become so humble before the Lord, and also we become humble before our fellow men, right? So that kind of helps us to build relationships, and and it helps us to move forward and keep moving forward, and just keep on building the relationships. So that is why we need to get rid of the ego. The third important thing what happens here is, so after he passed that second test of ego also, now he is going to river Jordan, right? And now again he is asking this question, we have so many clean rivers in our country, but why this guy is asking me to take dip in Jordan? River Jordan is not so great, So he was about to again give up his miracle, but again the servants, the people who are working under him, they persuaded him to take that 7 dip, and then he was cleansed. So what I'm trying to say here, sometimes, right, we may be asked to do something which we don't feel it is not making any sense, or it is not making any logic, but still are we trying to set aside our ego and willing to do? And just imagine if Naaman would not have listened to the voice of his subordinates or the people working under him, right, he would have definitely missed out that miracle. So that is why today, my dear friends, if you and I, if we are working in a place, right, we may have our subordinates, we may have people working under us, but most often, do we take the advices from them? Do we take the counsel that they give? Because many times we tend to reject them, or we tend to belittle people who work under us, because we think that we have to establish our supremacy over them, right? So that is why God says, when we get rid of the ego from our life, when we think that when we set aside the thinking that I am the best, nobody knows much more than me, so it is I who is going to decide, these kind of attitude is what will curtail our blessings, will stop our blessings, right? So as we learn from Naaman's life, it is very, very important that we remove the ego from our life. When we set aside the ego from our life, as Naaman received that miracle, right? The reason I say it's an unimaginable miracle is because in those days, leprosy is is an incurable disease, right? Once you have leprosy, that's all, you're doomed. But even in that situation, he was able to receive the miracle because he was willing to set aside the ego and do whatever he was asked to do. So today, whether be at office, workplace, or at family, or at church, sometimes in family, right? Youngsters, when they give some advice or when they give some suggestions, elders will reject them outright because they think they are not, older enough or mature enough like that. But sometimes God can use the younger generation also to give some suggestions to the family, right? So we have to be open. When we allow our ego to come in the relationships, what happens? It burns the relationship and there is no healthy discussions, right? So just think about our daily life, be it in church, family, workplace, society, wherever. Whenever we set aside the ego and we allow ourselves to listen to others, when we allow ourselves to do what others say, even sometimes if it doesn't make sense to us, that is when we are going to see the unimaginable miracles going to happen in our life, right? Today we may think there are a lot of issues that may be going in our life that we think they cannot happen. I can never imagine that they will happen like that. So we may have so many things like that. But God says, just set aside the ego and be humble in front of me. Be humble in front of people. You will see the door of miracle will open in your life, says the Lord. May the Lord bless this word. You all have a blessed and a happy day. God bless you.